Warning, this video will be starting with a bit of a rant, and most of the video will most likely be this rant. I am not terribly happy, and I'm aware a lot of people don't want to hear my negativity. Oh, I only want positive opinions! But I'm not going to blatantly lie to my audience about how I feel, or just leave it so that the comment section is going to be nothing but, what do you think about this problem? I'm going to address the issue, and I apologize if due to my tone and inflection I come off as hurtful or rude, and I do somewhat play up my anger for comedic purposes because being as negative as I am going to be while monotone comes off as rather stale, while raising my voice can be more entertaining for my viewers. My viewers sometimes like when I get angry. That's just how it be on the internet. Anyway, if you want to skip my rant, go to this point in the video. 3, 2, 1, let's rock. Are you taking the fucking piss, Death Battle? Another Marvel, another DC, another Marvel vs. DC, another Spider-Man character, another Spider-Man, another symbiote technically. We just had Batman vs. Captain America 2, now we have Batman vs. Spider-Man 2. Look, I had a whole video planned talking about my problems with the Marvel and DC issue in Death Battle, but I didn't release it because I was worried it would come off poorly. But the gloves are fucking off now. Here is the data on Marvel and DC in Death Battle. The total list of every Marvel and DC combatant we've had. 43 episodes of Death Battle have had Marvel or DC. Nearly 30% of the entire fucking series. And I should be clear that it's not Marvel versus DC that's the issue. Sure, we've had 20 battles of it, but it's not just that particular matchup. It's the overuse of Marvel and DC comics in general. Oh, but it's not 43 characters. No. It's 33 characters. Wonder Woman, Batman, and Deadpool have all appeared 3 times, while Thor, Captain Marvel, Venom, and Superman have all appeared twice. There have been 8 episodes with 1 DC combatant, 13 with 1 Marvel combatant, and 22 with both. That means in total there are 35 Marvels and 30 DCs. For comparison, Street Fighter has 10 episodes, Mortal Kombat has 10 episodes, Mario has 9 episodes, Sonic the Hedgehog has 9 episodes, Pokemon has 6 episodes, Naruto has 6 episodes, Dragon Ball has 8 episodes, and almost every other series has 5 or less. Comic books, in total, are the second most represented medium in all of Death Battle, the most being video games. However, here's the thing, video games have had 68 episodes in total. That is a shitload of episodes, though most come from Season 1. And the amount of franchise represented is 48. Roughly 70% of all episodes involving a video game have at least one franchise that hasn't appeared beforehand on average. Comic books have 52 episodes in total, 16 less than video games. However, the total amount of represented franchises in comic books? 9. 9 comic series. Those being Marvel Comics, DC Comics, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Bucky O'Hare, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, Scrooge McDuck, The Mask, and the Archie run of Sonic the Hedgehog comics. That is 17%. You have less than a fifth of your comic book battles involving a new franchise. Are you shitting me? 16 less total episodes, but 39 less represented franchises. And there are plenty of famous comics out there that aren't Marvel or DC, like fucking Hellboy, for instance. And the issue isn't inherently with Marvel or DC. I do like both of them. The issue is that this inherently will leave people out. Batgirl's most discussed matchup that I've seen is Batgirl vs. Kim Possible. I don't really care for the matchup myself, and does anybody else think that Kim looks like she has a mustache with a little smile under it? That's bothered me ever since I first saw her face. In doing one of these two matchups, you either leave out the Marvel crowd or leave out the Kim Possible crowd. The difference is the Marvel crowd have 34 other episodes they could go back and watch, while the Kim Possible crowd, they can get fucked. They've got nothing else. This whole season, they have not gone any longer than 2 episodes without using one of these franchises. That is ridiculous. Hey, you want to know a funny thing? We've got a new record, boys! Not only is this the most Marvel DC episodes in total, but also the highest percentage at 45%! Almost half of the entire season is made up of only 2 franchises. That is inexcusable. And okay, people use this quote from Ben Singer that was like, yeah, I'll put it on screen if I can find it. This is his response to why is there so much Marvel and DC. You'll notice that none of this fucking says that Corona altered the actual lineup. The quote is, "The pandemic has forced the release schedule to shift around." The release schedule. This wasn't the originally intended order of episodes. That does not change the episode choices. That only means we weren't meant to get it in this order. That still means we would have gotten 9 Marvel DC anyway. that is ludicrous to use that as an excuse, because that has nothing to do with what episodes are actually being done. There is no excuse to be so creatively bankrupt as to just use these two franchises over and over and over again. And sure, these fan bases will love it. Oh, that's great. But you know what? Other fan bases would have been happy if they got represented too. Do you realize that by leaving out Marvel just a little bit, you can bring a whole new other franchise in, or a returning franchise that's less common, back in to get a bit of the fun too, instead of just these two and then a couple others? The only other franchise in this season to appear more than once is Mortal Kombat, and only one of those episodes was good. The conversation about who would win gets stale and boring when it's always talking about the same set of feats characters scale to, the same general level of powers characters have, and so on. Heralds will always scale to this set of feats. Street tiers will always scale to this set of feats. The only Marvel DC fight this season where I saw a real debate on was Wally West vs Archie Sonic, and credit where it's due, the debate was really interesting and exciting. That was a really good episode, I liked it, and I thought it was a good idea. In spite of the oversaturation of DC Comics, that is actually a really interesting debate. Good choice, thumbs up. But outside of that, nobody gave a shit about Black Canary vs Sindel, She-Ra vs Wonder Woman, or Cable vs Booster Gold. There was no debate pretty much on who the winner would be between Winter Soldier vs Red Hood and Genos vs War Machine. And Venom vs Krona had more debate over which version of Venom should be used than which character should actually win. And this match is more of the same. You want to know how much I've seen people debate this matchup on the 4 or 5 different Discord servers that I have been on, which talk about Death Battle? None of them! None of them have really talked about it at all, because it's beyond complaining about it, because it's so obvious. And I want to remind people that it has nothing to do with the fact that it's specifically Marvel or DC that's being used. I love Marvel and DC. I love Thor and Superman. Superman's in fact one of my favorite characters in all of fiction. No bullshit. However, let's say we had 9 or 10 episodes of my 2 favorite franchises, Godzilla and Transformers. Let's say we had a 20 episode season, and the lineup included Destroyer vs Iris, Megatron vs Frieza, Space Godzilla vs Ultraman Belial, Sunstorm vs Burning Gundam, Baragon vs Barugon, Galaxy Force Starscream vs Shang Tsung, King Ghidorah vs Deathwing, Predaking vs Voltron, Aegitus vs Gamora, and Galactus vs Unicron. I like pretty much all these matchups. Well, Baragon vs Barugon is more of a gag to me, and Megatron vs Frieza is just more the one requested the most that I like the most. Megatron's other ideas aren't great either. Megatron doesn't have many good ideas in my eyes, and Frieza's got it even worse. Honestly, if Tyrants of Destruction didn't exist, I wouldn't care nearly as much for this matchup as I do. Please notice the GM, their stuff is great, and that number is too small. Love you, Ben. If you're watching this, fucking... Hopeful Turnabout's such a good track, holy shit. Anyway, they're all matchups that I would love to see one day, although only 2 of them are ever going to happen. But I don't want them in one season, because there's no reason for there to be that much of them happening. And the common counter-arguments beyond, oh, well, Marvel DC's got a lot of fans, so what? So does fucking Dragon Ball and Undertale. But the most common arguments I see are absurd. Who cares as long as it's good? I care! I expect Death Battle to be good at the minimum, regardless of if the matchup is shit or not. Just saying, who cares as long as it's good, is like, are you fucking kidding me? Of course people are going to care. Of course I care. People are left out because they're less interested. The matchup is often a very big part of what gets people interested in an episode. Even if the episode's good, if someone prioritizes wanting to see characters they like, fuck you, I guess. You're just fucked. If your favorite matchup is not a super mega request or a long-time rivalry or includes a Marvel or DC, get fucked. That's just how it ends up being. I don't want any franchises to oversaturate any Versus show, like Undertale and Five Nights at Freddy on Cartoon Fight Club, or Dragon Ball in the upcoming season of 1 Minute Melee, which hopefully they've changed the lineup on. With any luck, the reason 1 Minute Melee Season 7 has been so delayed is because that was the original plan, but due to a negative reception, they decided to change the idea of the entire season being Dragon Ball themed. I don't want oversaturation because the debate becomes bland and boring. There's no interest. There's no being introduced to a new series. At most, there's being introduced to a new character, but even then, that's pretty rare. The only Marvel DC character I didn't see many people knowing when they were fucking brought up was goddamn Booster Gold. Just because an episode is good doesn't excuse a bad matchup, because 90% of Death Battle's episodes are already good. The episode is going to be good regardless of the matchup, But not just saying that as is a reductive way to get past the problem with the oversaturation. It's a stupid fucking argument. And it's especially important when people say an episode is good when 90% of the time they're talking about just the animation. Even though 80% of the video is the analysis and conclusion. If the analysis is boring to me, but the animation is good, then the episode is still not likely for me to consider it just above the borderline of good. Because what I am consuming as a viewer, most of what I am consuming is not good if only the animation is good. If 80% of something is bad, how can you say it's really good? It'd be like watching a movie where 80% of it is rubbish and boring, but 20% is really cool action, and saying it's a really good movie when most of the time you're checked out and bored out of your fucking skull. The other arguments I often see are that Marvel and DC have a lot of variety. First off, that's a reductive statement, as it implies that that's some sort of unique trait, as if other franchises don't also have lots of variety to them. And secondly, most characters scale to a set amount of feats anyway. Unless you're a cosmic being that is above them, you're going to just scale to a set amount of feats, and even the cosmic beings really don't get as far as they infinitely transcend X, which infinitely transcends X, which is this level of dimensions on a dimensional tier list. Because most of the characters scale to a set amount of feats, really, the analysis is either going to be scaling to feats already talked about, that's going to be boring if they do it too often, or a dramatic lowballing of a character's power by going purely off their own independent feats without scaling, leaving you with pretty much no way to come out both looking good and also being entertaining when you do it to such a monotonous degree. But also, let's take a fucking look at what Death Battle used in Season 7 from Marvel and DC. 2 Spider-Men, 3 if you want to count Venom, or 2 symbiotes if you consider how Spider-Gwen became later on in her run, a slightly different Iron Man, a slightly more overpowered Flash, a returning character, Captain America with a metal arm instead of a shield, 2 members of the Bat family, one just with guns and the other with tits, and only 4 characters who aren't directly related to or are extremely similar to a previously used Marvel or DC character. There's Static Shock, and no, I do not consider him super close to Thor because they are very different, just they happen to share the ability to fly and use lightning. No, they're not similar. And he was fighting one of the 2 Spider-Men this season. Black Canary, who was in one of the least interesting matchups of the season, and the combatants of Cable vs. Booster Gold, the Marvel vs. DC that used to be the least interesting to most people, and is sadly probably the best Marvel vs. DC we've had all season. I can't say best Marvel/DC because we did have Wally vs. Archie Sonic. Miles didn't have to fight at DC, he had other matchups. Genos had lots of other options too. Hell, even Bakugo would have been better than fucking War Machine. She-Ra had lots of other potential options, and Krona had lots of better opponents. In fact, Krona had opponents that weren't total fucking garbage. Of the 9 episodes we've had, the only ones that I don't think could easily be swapped out to not involve Marvel or DC, or be swapped out to only involve one, are Winter Soldier vs. Red Hood, because it's sort of a pseudo-legacy matchup. It's not quite old enough for me to be happy to call it a legacy matchup, but it is a pseudo-legacy matchup, and it's a massive request. Wally vs. Archie Sonic, because neither have any better matchups, and yes, I'm glad we got Wally West instead of Xeno Goku to fight Archie Sonic. I'm glad we got the DC in that case. And Cable vs. Booster Gold, because Cable vs. Silver or Trunks is rubbish, and Booster Gold's only, like, halfway decent matchup is fucking Saitama, and God no. Alright. Whew, rant over. Now for the prediction. Spider-Gwen is going to win. She has all the advantages and all of the stats by a landslide, and Batgirl doesn't have any major hacks or arsenal pieces that will be able to outdo Spider-Gwen's sheer power advantage. She should be able to scale to Spider-Men like Peter and Miles, who were put at town level and FTL, while Batgirl at best scales to other Bat family members like Batman and Red Hood, who were put at really pathetic levels, because honestly, compared to Marvel street tiers, the lower end of DC street tiers are not very impressive. That's it. Yup, that's the whole prediction. You see what I mean about this not being a particularly interesting matchup to talk about? It's Spider-Man versus Batman. Now, Red vs. Blue, an episode I wasn't particularly excited for, but over time did drum up some of my nostalgia for the first 10 seasons of Red vs. Blue. Because I legitimately really liked the show in its heyday. Did I enjoy the episode? It was alright. I can say it was about as good as I thought it would be. So that's a thing. There are just some issues that nag me, however the analysis I thought was more or less fine. It touched on what was important, although it didn't call Tucker's sword the Great Key, so that's a 0 out of 10 right there. No, but in all seriousness, I think it was fine. See, with the same series fight, feats aren't often the most important, as generally the characters can scale within a similar ballpark to each other, like with the 50 Megaton feat that they mentioned for both teams. Really, that had no purpose in the episode, because it didn't matter. What matters is that the characters already wear, like, the same armor. For instance, one that they didn't bring up was Simmons' speed advantage. However, saying that because he can change clothes really fast is silly, because other characters have been able to keep up with his speed. and a clone of Texas could even effortlessly beat down him, Griff, Sarge, and Tucker with the Great Key at the same time. But aside from that, I thought it covered what was most important. Good start. I think the analysis was fine, because really what it had to talk about was the characters' dynamics, their arsenals, and their skills, because their stats are all relatively close, with the exception of Caboose and Tex's strength, which is significantly above everyone else. Then the animation happens, and there are some pretty big issues in my eyes. Now, the most excusable, and yes, this is completely excusable, is Caboose's voice. It sounds like a shitty impression. It has the complete wrong inflection, and is kind of halfway between the original voice and my voice for Dr. Fate. Hello! That's okay, because Joel Heyman is kind of less than agreeable. And you're never going to really replicate a voice as iconic as Caboose's with a replacement. It sucks, but it is excusable. There was no way around it, so I can't really get annoyed. But the rest of the voices also sounded weird to me. For instance, listen to Church. Church sounds weird. Compare his voice to the same voice from Metaverse Carolina.
Oh, come on, they're hilarious. Everyone talks in one-liners and the plot's non-existent. It's like the characters are just there to beat the shit out of each other.
Okay, why did we bring the flag out here? None of that is right.
Maybe it's just me, but while this is definitely Bernie Burns, it sounds like a different character. Tucker also sounds weird. Here's a comparison.
What favors could you possibly have stored up with someone who dumped you? She didn't dump me, Tucker. It was mutual. Mutual in what way? Mutual in the sense that you were both single the moment after she dumped you? Yeah.
What's a flag got to do with rain? Wait, do you think the flag is an umbrella? Caboose, have you ever seen an umbrella before?
This one is not nearly as noticeable to me, but it is distracting. Texas, O'Malley, and Sheila, meanwhile, got literally no lines. Yup. Now, Sheila is one thing, because she gets taken out nearly immediately, and she only really would have been able to talk to Caboose, who jumps out of her, really quickly. But Texas having no lines is really aggravating to me. I like Texas quite a lot. She's not my favorite freelancer. That's Washington, because he's a fucking boss. But no, she says nothing. And despite being name-dropped in the analysis, O'Malley doesn't get to appear at all. Now, the red team did get it better. Matt Hullum continues his fantastic Sarge performance, and he sounds perfect. Lopez, unlike Church, gets to sound exactly like he should. Bernie was great at Lopez, so I don't know what was up with his Church performance. Simmons was also fine, but he barely says anything, and the same goes with Donut. Griff, however, what did they do to you? He sounds like Griff, but his deliveries aren't good. This is not a fault of the voice, a fault of the direction, which it sounds like he didn't have much of. His first few lines are fine, but when he gets kicked off the warthog, he doesn't sound worried or concerned. He just sort of sounds like someone closed a window in his face. Oh, come on. Instead of oh shit, tank! His big nose sounds awful, but not in a funny way. And when he's grunting in pain, it doesn't sound like he's in pain. He's like, yuck, Why does Lopez have the same death as the Night King from Game of Thrones? What the fuck? Although I guess that is the only good death. Most of them die when Caboose shoots a sniper and takes them all out. Oh, about that, funnily enough, the only jokes that I found funny in this entire episode were Sarge's response to flying off a cliff, and when he's like, oh, I didn't expect it to be so big, and Tex being shot in the tits. But that last one is more because of the way she falls over and how janky it is. But the jank in this case is not a negative, because it was 100% intentional. Looking at it, it's pretty obvious it was intended to be janky. Other than that, the jokes didn't do anything for me, but that's because maybe there were almost no jokes. In fact, for a 10-person battle, there was almost no banter at all. Yeah, no banter in red versus blue? Donut dances in front of a hail of sniper bullets and doesn't say anything. Are you kidding me? Do you not understand Donut at all? He would say something really stupid and inappropriate. Griff complains twice and then says almost nothing. And that's weird. Griff is one of the funniest characters in this series because he's such a cynical asshole. And after his big no, he says nothing. Lopez gets one monologue and one minor line afterwards that establishes he's alive, meaning he actually survived the episode. Okay. Caboose gets almost no lines after Sheila blows up. In fact, he does almost nothing for the entirety of the fight, despite being the last one standing. Even when Sarge is monologuing, he's just standing there motionless. You think they'd have him look left or right as if he was confused because he's an idiot. But Tucker says all of one or two sentences, Church says almost nothing, and Simmons dies before the fight really gets started. And Donut gets one line. Seriously? The one thing I expected from this episode was a bunch of funny banter, a good focus on the dialogue, and getting that nice red versus blue feel. You know the one. That distinctive feel that you only really get from the comedy writers at Rooster Teeth when they put the effort in to try and be funny. But nope. A 10-fighter battle had almost no banter whatsoever. And that is truly shocking considering the characters involved and their history with one another. The only characters who talk to another character while fighting are Lopez and Sarge. Just those two. This episode feels like a huge waste, and that's saying something given I didn't think it'd be that good anyway. Now, why do I say at least that the episode was as good as I expected? Because it was, just not in the way I expected. I expected a bad analysis with a very funny but lacking in good action fight, and then a shitty conclusion. What I got, however, was a decent analysis with a decently choreographed fight, but exceedingly unfunny comedy, and then a shitty conclusion. Look, the conclusion was understandable, but a lot of what was said in it was not conveyed very well in the fight. Caboose didn't get a "my name is Michael J. Caboose and I hate beds" scene, so his strength wasn't properly conveyed. Texas's strength also wasn't conveyed. While she did dominate Griff in seconds, that's because Griff is a fucking loser. Sarge was actually a good match for her for a while, and while he was clearly losing, he managed to go mano y womano with her for 30 seconds, then 40 seconds, and then another full 20 seconds, outliving her. Keeping in mind that most of it was off-screen, but we still see him engage her, then we cut somewhere else, and when it cuts back, he's still fighting her, and then he gets overwhelmed. Sarge manages a full minute and a half in total fighting Texas, and only seems to be at a disadvantage in skill, not physical strength. In fact, he gets into a contest of raw strength and doesn't immediately flop. He actually stands up pretty well against her. While Tucker's skill was well conveyed enough, given he outdid one of the two legitimately competent people on the red team, he also fought that one person and spent the entire other time doing literally nothing, just standing there. And once again, they say Simmons has a speed edge, but he doesn't really get to show that off because he fucking dies. One of the main advantages they give the red team over the blue team never gets to appear in the fight. In fact, the other advantage they gave intelligence due to Simmons also doesn't get to show up because he dies so quickly. And in fact, the third advantage they give them in epic firepower also doesn't get to appear. Griff and Donut and Simmons never fire their guns. Lopez almost doesn't really, and it's only Sarge on the red team that fires his gun. In fact, even in blue team, Church is the only one who really uses his gun, and he misses. I guess technically Sheila does too, but shut up. I'm kind of shocked they didn't at least bring up the red team's major teamwork advantage. I mean, the red team's never lost a member and have fought a lot of fights together, while the blue team only has 2 consistent members, while Texas and Sheila have almost no teamwork experience with the other 3. So yeah, I've mostly criticized red versus blue, but it's not all bad. The choreography was nice, the animation was actually really good in terms of how it looked, and I really liked the color palette because it was fittingly bright and colorful. Sarge was an absolute treat and really carried the battle for me, and the song Blood Gulch Blues is legitimately a pretty decent track overall. So I didn't hate it. I don't even think it's that bad overall, but the animation did disappoint me and kinda left me unhappy. And then I watched the remake of Mulan and I didn't get any happier. But at least I can say, this episode's better than the other same series fight we got this season. You get a gold star for effort and a silver star for execution. But I'm glad Sarge got the respect he deserves. I would be fine if you did Sarge vs. Soldier now. Also, I saw your message, Robert. No one's gonna understand why I'm saying this. No one knows you, but you know what? Fuck you, Robert.